jammed for time?
I'm not, but I was told you had 45 minutes. That's
no,
all.
I'm not. I drank this entire cup of coffee and this entire water. Can you hang on 1 second? Is it
okay, sure.
Is this going to screw you in post?
No, it won't.
All right, you guys got this? All
right. Yeah.
While I have made an argument for the past couple of years that Masahiro Sakurai is a horrible businessman, he's got some pretty tough competition known as Tony Khan. For 3 years now, Tony Khan has been in charge of his own wrestling company. Well, let me clarify, his father, Shahid Khan, created the company for him and gave him the money to fund it. AEW was pretty much a gift for Tony Khan, who had dreams to be in charge of his own wrestling company, and Shahid practically invested $100 million of his own money to make it happen. And this is a real quote on why Shahid started AEW with Tony. Tony Khan said, "My dad expected it to fail, but I convinced him to take a leap. He gave me the money because he said I'd inherit it anyway, so I might as well blow it now." And so far, he has been a laughingstock in the wrestling industry. Here are 6 reasons why. 1. He has no class. I mean, just look at him. Does he look like he owns a company at all? He's got a wild shaggy mop, and his front teeth have a noticeable grayness to them. An obvious sign that he's on crack. It's also worth mentioning that only seldom does he ever wear a suit. This is what he wore when being on TV with the president of New Japan Pro Wrestling. This might sound like a nitpick, but I never once looked at him and thought, Vince McMahon is in big trouble. He'll wear a sweater, a jacket, his Jaguars polo shirt, but so help him that he ever bothers to look and act like a company leader. It doesn't stop with his appearance, though, he is just very ignorant. He said classless statements about having more knowledge than Ted Turner and has a more successful company than WCW. He thinks he is on the same level as Paul Heyman. Now, I don't like Paul Heyman. I think he's never done anything meaningful on WWE television in over 8 years, and I think the only reason he still has a job to this day is because of Brock Lesnar. He ought to be in Batman movies instead. But Heyman had more skills as a promoter, with 1% of the budget, than Tony Khan does now. Tony Khan openly tweeted that one of his former talents wasn't a good enough wrestler. He openly stated that one of his former champions wasn't a draw. When Chavo Guerrero had to film a season of Young Rock, Tony never answered his phone calls when he was ready to return. He berated Impact Wrestling on their show during their partnership. He used Hurricane Ian as a means to promote one of his episodes of Dynamite. This guy has an extreme lack of self-awareness, and he would be in a much better place if he only stayed behind the scenes and not gotten in his own way. 2. He has no skills. Tony Khan is 39 years old. What are his skills? He thinks being a lifelong fan of wrestling entitles him to be in charge of a wrestling promotion. It does not. In the time he's been watching wrestling on TV and attending backyard mud show events, he has learned nothing about managing a team. He has learned nothing about communication, or investing, or storytelling, or production, or marketing, or any sort of quality that one needs to run a promotion. He honestly believes that being a lifelong fan of wrestling is the only credential necessary to run an entire company. While it's true that there is no such degree for being a wrestling promoter, it's still a business, and for as long as you have a business, a real businessman has to run it. The people behind the scenes have to be knowledgeable in order for them to solve problems and prevent new problems from occurring. Do you know what Tony Khan's idea of marketing is? That's pathetic. If you have to point to a jacket you're forcing your employee to wear, you're not cut out to lead your company. I see this article on Forbes, and there's this photo shoot of AEW's wrestlers surrounding the ring. Who is that front and center of everyone? What is he doing there in the middle? It's like Sakurai, who clamors to be the center of attention of his own product. Tony Khan is not a draw, though he thinks that people always want to see and hear from him. He should be nowhere near in front of a microphone or camera. Every week he addresses the crowds before the tapings begin, and he sounds coked out of his mind. After the show, he'll be in the ring acting like a total buffoon with other wrestlers. One week he'll be hugging the best friends. The next week he'll lay out Sean Spears. You can find videos of these things every week on Twitter. His wrestlers should be the ones attending interviews and podcasts so that they can promote their company in a proper way. And alone at that. It's so weird that he's sitting next to wrestlers all the time at his post-show press conferences. That time should be just for the wrestlers, not him. Nobody is lining up to hear his opinions. 3. He has no financial awareness. Apparently, Tony Khan graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in finance. Ironically, he does not know how to manage money. He only knows how to blow it. Both to Sakurai and Tony Khan, money is not an object to either man. They both see it as a disposable resource to acquire whatever it is they want, rather than use it wisely and invest in things that could actually be profitable and help business. And coincidentally, neither man even uses his own money, they spend another person's money in the form of a budget. So they both treat assets like their toys for their own personal collections. Different kinds of toys, but everything else is the same nonetheless. So AEW currently has a deal with Warner Media that runs until January 2024. It's for $40 to $45 million a year in rights fees. Never mind that $26 million of that $40+ million is meant for being able to tape and produce the show weekly. He now has over 150 wrestlers on his roster. It's not known how much money every single talent is getting, but Billy Body has reported that the top 12 earners alone total around that $45 million mark. Two other major expenses include Tony Khan's purchase of Ring of Honor, or some semblance of Ring of Honor, seeing that he's had difficulties in getting it a TV deal. While it's not confirmed, rumors are going around that he spent less than $4 million to over $40 million. It's been close to a year since he first announced that he bought the company, and so far it's nothing more than a piece of property to him. The second large expense is the upcoming video game, AEW Fight Forever. It's rumored that around $80 million has already gone into the game, but we know that the budget is at least $20 million, according to Tony Khan himself from a podcast more than a year ago. The game still hasn't come out yet. An argument can be made that certainly AEW must be making money, so Tony Khan must be making a profit, and that all those things are justifiable. Okay. If they were making money, why aren't they expending? Why do they only work once a week? Why don't they make media appearances? Why don't they have a real headquarters? Why is the Jacksonville Jaguars stadium their address? Shouldn't that be a priority? This segues into the next point. 4. He has no real strategy for his company. He has no plans for his business. Not financially, not creatively, not spiritually. If you're spending money that you don't have, then you're in debt. He relies on signing new talents that were released from WWE just to keep ratings afloat, not even increase ratings, but to maintain them.
If you look at the problems you asked me earlier about WCW, if you look at problems that led to possibly what the demise of WCW was, I think one of the major issues was that they had a very large roster with a lot of people making a lot of money, and a lot of those people were really good. If you were just to try to chop down the WCW roster, you'd be making some really tough decisions and say because there were so many people across the board that were really good, but you can't pay every talented person in the business $100,000. Your company will go under quick because you won't have enough revenue to offset what you're paying out. So you have to make smart decisions, and you can't hire every person you like, and you can't hire every person that you think is good, because there's a lot of really good talent.
And he's counting on this strategy to convince the Warner Brothers executives to award him with a larger TV deal, so that he has an easy way to pay back all this debt he made by making all these purchases and acquisitions. As where things stand now, it looks like it's not going to happen. David Zaslav is in extreme cost-cutting mode. If AEW is offered an extension, it's not going to be for more than the current deal. It might be less, and it doesn't matter if AEW is making money, because WB is trying not to spend as much. They could very well just drop AEW in favor of picking up scripted seasonal programming in its place. And if Kathleen Finch and other executives are actually watching the product, they should be aware of how poor quality the product is. Imagine if you had a Batman movie and you saw bad performances, bad camera work, bad cinematography, a lack of storytelling, or storylines are very hard to follow, characters disappear and reappear, and the fact that you have to pay $40 million a year for it. Simply put, the quality of the show isn't good, and Tony Khan has never cared about making it better. He had a horde of all this talent and only 3 hours of programming a week, so he has to rotate that talent in and out, trying to please everyone. By doing it the way he's doing it, it's hard to develop characters, it's hard to create storylines that get your audience invested, it's hard to sell tickets because fans aren't sure if they're even going to see the wrestlers they want to see. He gives himself 3 months to build towards each pay-per-view, and he cobbles together a wrestling card at the last minute full of matches with no build. If Tony Khan was content with a much smaller roster, if he hired a creative team and was focused on having characters and stories develop on a weekly basis, his company would be in a far better state than it is now. 5. He won't grant resignations. This may seem like a very specific thing compared to all the other reasons, but it really does impact a lot of his business in more ways than one. Now, if you somebody like Andrade, who asked for his release from WWE to go to AEW, and then he decides he want to go back to WWE and try to get out of his contract with AEW, then sorry, you get what you deserve. But if you're somebody in AEW who has had to take a back seat, who has gotten lost in the shuffle, and you're not making as much money as before, then you are right to want a release. Back in 2020, Tony Khan has stated that any AEW roster talent who wanted to leave would be granted their resignation. So why did he change his mind? Because Vince McMahon is no longer in charge of WWE, and many of the wrestlers that Khan has now used to have a good relationship with Triple H. So if these wrestlers in AEW were to now leave, Triple H would likely take them back. But now the shoe is on the other foot. Vince used to fire swaths of wrestlers because there were too many on the payroll. Tony Khan would gladly give some of them spots on his payroll. But if somebody were to ask for their release, that's asking too much. So if Tony has 150 wrestlers and he doesn't have the means to give most of them proper booking and development and possible wages, why keep them? So far, the people who have reportedly asked for their release from AEW are Brian Cage, Jonathan Gresham, Aleister Black, Miro formerly known as Rusev, Andrade, and Thunder Rosa, while she was their women's champion at the time. So far, nobody has been released. Rather, Tony Khan just sent them home where they just don't get booked for months. It's more worth it to keep the unhappy talent under contract rather than see them walk and possibly get hired elsewhere. Which is stupid, because you're not helping them and you're not helping yourself. What do you gain by keeping employees who don't want to be there? At the same time, he books wrestlers from other companies to battle the main eventers on AEW's primetime shows. From New Japan, from Impact, Noah, independent standouts, for real. If you want to be a big star in AEW, you don't even need to sign a contract to be treated like one. And this leads to the final reason why Tony Khan is a laughingstock. 6. He is a terrible, useless leader. Tony Khan doesn't want to be a leader. He does not want to control or create order in his company. He simply wants to be everyone's friend. And I have to ask, does Tony Khan even have a partner or family of his own? Did his father ever hug him when he was a child? This is just so bizarre and creepy to watch. But yeah, there are some wrestlers who are very close to him use that to gain authority over him. So wrestlers like Britt Baker will assert their own authority and enforce creative storylines without the approval of other wrestlers that they're involved in. Tony Khan would side with the people that have more influence rather than simply do the right and fair decision. There have been 3 backstage physical altercations in the past 2 months, and so far, nobody has been fired from the company. Eddie Kingston punched or pie-faced Sammy Guevara, and he only got a 2-week suspension, so he was sent home for a shorter time than many other wrestlers have not been booked for over a month or more. It's crazy to think about. Then the whole debacle after the All Out pay-per-view happened, where CM Punk was burying the Ev piece, and Tony Khan was just sitting next to him like a useless piece of garbage, doing nothing to stop it, letting his employees getting publicly berated and lambasted.
I'm hurt and I'm old and I'm fucking tired and I work with fucking children.
Because he doesn't want to interrupt Punk, that's more important than protecting his company apparently. So because Tony Khan makes himself out to be a big fucking deal, he remains at the press conference briefing for the other wrestlers while something serious happens backstage. That's also more important than protecting his company. Because if he were backstage to do something, there was a chance a fight wouldn't have happened at all. CM Punk is the highest paid wrestler for AEW at $5 million a year, and only a year into that contract, AEW will likely do a contract buyout. So Tony Khan is going to blow $6, $9, $15 million that he likely never needed to. Because we could all see it coming that CM Punk was going to stir up some sort of drama. And that's not even it. Recently, Andrade and Sammy Guevara got in a fight. And there were warning signs that Khan knew about beforehand, but did little to nothing to prevent another incident. It was even reported that Khan told Andrade that if he punched Sammy, he wouldn't get fired. So in Khan's company, you won't get fired for committing assault. All this tells me is that this will happen again until Tony feels like taking serious action. And that's not all. It somehow can get worse. Despite having had just 3 backstage fights, Tony Khan's biggest goal is winning a Booker of the Year award from a publication he's colluding with in funding. Tony Khan is just a conflict avoider. He doesn't want to solve problems, but rather tries escaping them until they eventually go away. It's like Antifa. They'll occupy blocks of cities, they'll terrorize home and business owners, they'll break every law in the book, and the mayor won't do jack shit for days or even weeks. When that mayor finally decides to act, it's because those criminals show up at his or her house. You can't make this stuff up. We are not at that point with Tony Khan yet. But I digress. Nobody should feel safe being in an AEW locker room from now on. He doesn't take care of his employees, and this is all the more reason for Warner Brothers to sever ties with AEW at the right time. If I were Shahid Khan, I would at least put a stop to his son's management before it affects his own reputation. He is a bad excuse for a leader. I have never watched AEW since January 2020, but Tony Khan is that reason, making the product hard to digest for casual viewers, and him overexposing himself while demonstrating how much of a pushover he is does not help matters. If Tony Khan isn't willing to right the ship, and if his dad is too busy to care to intervene, the next best thing would be for Warner Brothers executives to say, enough is enough. So what do Tony Khan and Sakurai have in common? They have big egos. They're children at heart. They lavishly spend another person's money. They use that money on personal vanity and not investments. They love the spotlight. They put themselves front and center of their own products and expect their audience to care about them. They constantly lie to protect their own reputation. They collude with the gaming media to cover for them and to have them deny that they can do no wrong while you can otherwise see differently. I have to think they both have the same condition, if you will. Now for the differences. Sakurai is a good 10 years older than Tony Khan, but whether you see that in Tony's or Sakurai's favor is up for debate. Sakurai is married, while we don't even know if Tony Khan has a girlfriend, and when it comes to work ethic, I say Sakurai has a complete edge. So while Sakurai doesn't have as much money at his disposal as Khan, at least he's had a real job history, and not just leech of his dad, and inherit a company. Oh, and while Sakurai doesn't drink water, Tony Khan can drink water I guess. And then cough it back up.